The real boogeymans are basically, our government servants, the politicians, which are trying to acquire more and more power. And at the same time, of course, also, the central bankers. They want to destroy Western civilization. They want to destroy the capitalist system. They want to destroy the family. They want to destroy all the belief system.
Hey friends, this video is brought to you by our patrons. Thank you so much for your continued support. And by our friends at McIlvaney Weekly Commentary, which features some of the best monetary, economic, geopolitical news and information available anywhere, and it's hosted by David McIlvaney. Just go to weeklycommentary.com and sign up for free, and also get the free geopolitical newsletter. That's weeklycommentary.com. Hey guys, I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Claudio Grass. It's been far too long since I had him on, and he's back. Claudio is starting a new company, and you can visit him online right now at claudiograss.ch. Sound money for a sound society. You guys know Claudio because he's written for Mises Institute, Acting Man, safehaven.com, and you can find him on Twitter at Claudio Grass. One of the brightest minds out there. How are you, Claudio?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Sean. Good to have you on the line again.
Yeah, it's so good to talk with you. You're in Switzerland, of course. We can talk about Jim Rickards' open letter to Trump here in a second. I want to ask you about SDRs. But why don't you give us your thoughts on where we currently stand as it pertains to this criminal international banking system and all these central banks? Are they losing control, or are they merely gaining more control, Claudio?
Well, of course, we are living in a centralized monetary system dominated by central banks, which have the power to print money out of thin air, basically can decide for themselves, who receives the money first, at what interest rates they will receive it, so that they can bribe politicians and finance war. So they have, it's a centralized system. It's also a dollar centralized centric system. Central banks, that gives a lot of power to the central banks and to the banking system. But when we look at, what's happening since 2008 and where we are standing today, I think back in 2008 we had 140 trillion of total credit. Now we're standing at 200 trillion credit. They basically just injected a lot of liquidity into the system, buying old debt and securities and all that stuff, to keep the system liquid and to basically finance, the banks with new money. But the outcome is, we don't see a rise in the real economy. The real economy is going down. We still have, mass unemployment in certain areas, and at the same time, we see that whenever you have a system that is crashing, it's starting at the peripheries, and that's what we can see also when it comes to, the refugee crisis. That's when we look at what's going on, with the currencies. Brexit, Trump, all that kind of stuff. This is a global uprising, which is on its way and which is going further in the future. And so central bankers, they cannot control the individual person. But of course, the whole system, I always call it, it's a collective corruption, a system of collective corruption. So a lot of people have a lot of things at stake. And they also try to, not to think about what's coming, because they have a house, they still have a job, some of them, and they don't want to think about what's happening when the whole system goes bust. But at the end of the day, if it's possible to print wealth out of nothing, then, the central banks can hand over us $1 million on a dollar on a yearly basis, and we can all live a happy life. But we all know this is not possible. So everything, comes to an end, and but we don't know exactly when, because at the end of the day, it's based on people perception, and right now the people still, at least in the Western world, they hold on to the actual system. But we can see the resistance when it comes to fake news and the divide and conquer situation we are witnessing all over, the States and also in Europe.
Yeah, and I want to ask you something here. You mentioned a global revolution. We can talk about so many things, including the 1 million people who gathered in
Barcelona.
Yeah, these people are very excited about their independence. So we can talk about that in a second. But if you don't mind, I would like to ask your opinion about the IMF, about the Bank for International Settlements and SDRs. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read just a little snippet here from James Rickard's article at Daily Reckoning, which was a warning letter to President Trump about the SDR and the death of the dollar. The reason I bring it up is there seems to be a lot of disagreement about SDRs with people that I've interviewed in the past in trust. It was Andy Hoffman specifically who said the SDR is not going to amount to a hill of beans. And in this letter that James Rickards wrote, he says, I've been telling our fellow Americans that the financial global elite was planning to issue their own globalist currency called special drawing rights, or SDRs, and that those elites would use this new currency to replace the US dollar as the global reserve currency. He says, the United Nations and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, have both confirmed this plan to replace the US dollar is real. Here's the proof that the US dollar is under attack right in front of our eyes. He writes, the UN said we need a new global reserve system that no longer relies on the United States dollar as the single major reserve currency. And he goes on to say, more recently the IMF advanced their plan to help private institutions such as the UK's Standard Chartered Bank issue bonds in SDRs. Although our mainstream media ignored this major event, the UK media reported Standard Chartered successfully issues SDR bonds in China. He writes, this is all happening, and on January 1st, 2018, this trend to replace the US dollar will accelerate. That's when the global elite will implement a major change to the plumbing of our financial system. When this system goes live, many nations will be able to dump US dollars for SDRs. Sorry that was a little long-winded. I just wanted to share that with you because so many people have said, that I've interviewed, have said, don't worry about it. What do you make of what Rickards wrote there, and what do you make of SDRs and whatever new global system is going to be rolling out?
Well, that's a tough question, of course. I personally have the feeling that there is no possibility that we can have a smooth transaction into a new system of, SDRs or whatever. I think, a currency reform will come after a crash, that they might try to push something else. At the same time, we are living in a dollar-centric system. Even when we see that China is signing, gold-backed currency deals basically to trade in oil and so on. It's something, but when we look at the whole world system, 64% of all the central bank reserves are still in US dollars. I think the next one is the euro, is about 19.7%. We have a luring banking crisis in the eurozone, for example. The European Central Bank owns 40% of all the European sovereign debt. They are monthly doing purchases of 60 billions. So we have negative interest rates. If the ECB stops to buy, they tend to decrease that amount of monthly purchases in the future. But if they stop to buy, then basically everyone will see that that the market is naked, because you won't find other people buying the sovereign debts of the eurozone. So I believe there is not, a smooth transition into another monetary system. I think that is not likely to happen. Maybe they can always, with those kind of information, they always can try to, calm down the market, keep the system a bit longer together. But at the same, I believe, it's going to fall apart, because central bankers, they don't. They are manipulating the market. They are the market, because there is no market left. They're distorting all the markets. But I think the outcome will be sooner or later that there will be a trigger. That could be the euro. That could also be the Japanese yen. That could be something in China. That could be war in North Korea and so on. But that's not controllable by a few guys who believe that they're wise enough to control, the whole world and its financial and economical system.
Okay, as it pertains to the US dollar, though, and its future as the world's reserve currency, and our privilege to be able to just print money into existence out of thin air and have the world just sit on this debt for us, we just hit the historic $20 trillion debt mark. And Trump has sided with Democrats on a debt limit raise. in a rare bipartisan deal, writes Reuters. So they're just going to continue to raise the debt ceiling as though that means we're not actually defaulting on our debt. It's not repayable debt, Claudio. The world must clearly know that, which is why there is a move away from the dollar by the Russians, by the Chinese. The Chinese have introduced a new gold-backed yuan for oil trade. The writing's on the wall. So I guess the question is how close are we to the precipice, those of us living in the States that rely on this dollar for our purchasing power?
Well, I mean, trading in a foreign currency or in the renminbi or in the Russian ruble or whatever, that's something. But to place your cash once you cashed in the goods, and then you have to place it somewhere. I still believe where want first of all, the United States is still the biggest capital market you can find. And at the same time, if I would have to decide myself where I want to place my money into, if there is a crisis occurring, I wouldn't put it into ruble. I wouldn't put it into China. I wouldn't put it into the Eurozone. Most likely, I would put it back into the US dollar. And so, I believe, that we're going to see in the future a strengthening of the US dollar again. That the gold dollar is going up, but when the dollar is going up, that's basically then the end game, because that will just lead to a collapse of the whole monetary system, because all the indebted nations and institutions and so on with a higher dollar are going to be bankrupt. But the way I see it is, at the end of the day, I think the last currency which is going to break is the US dollar. So right now, the whole decline, I mean, we have seen that since December 2016, basically the dollar is in decline, and the euro bottomed in December 16, is going up since then. The same is also for the yen. But I think now they are really scratching a certain top level. And I have the feeling that we might see in the future, that the dollar is going up again.
All right, well, let me ask you this then. As it pertains to the real boogeymen on planet Earth, there's a lot of fear-mongering all over the planet right now, especially in this country. We're the victims of constant mainstream propaganda as it relates to ISIS and ISIS terror and terrorism overseas, and we need to continue to go into these Middle Eastern nations to fight this war on terror, because if we don't take the war to them, they're going to bring the war to us. It's just constant fear-mongering. From your view in Switzerland, given everything you know about the international banking system and sound money, who are the real boogeymen on planet Earth, Claudio?
Oh, I mean, the real boogeymans on planet Earth are definitely, those kind of people who believe that they are smart enough to control or to lead, to dictate governments, central banks, and so on. So, I mean, it's, the real boogeymans are basically, our government servants, the politicians, which are trying to acquire more and more power. And at the same time, of course, also our superstars, which are also called, the central bankers. And then, of course, in the background, I mean, you always have, when we look back into history, what always have been important is, that you, whenever it's getting messy, that you come up with a divide and conquer strategy, so that the people start fighting each other and not looking to the top, who is basically responsible for the whole mess. And I think that's what we are seeing right now as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I don't think we can have a discussion about the boogeymen who run the world without mentioning the name Rothschild. And I simply bring it up because it's now so evident how much power that family still wields. And of course, one of the biggest donors to Hillary Clinton during her campaign, one of the biggest fundraising partners she had was Linda Rothschild, her personal friend. And we really see in the WikiLeaks emails the way that Clinton kowtowed to Lady Rothschild. And it just, I think, needs to be said that, and you hit the nail on the head, it's the international bankers that are the real boogeymen. Do you follow Ronald Bernard at all, that international banking whistleblower?
No.
Okay. Well, he said that at the top of the pyramid, these people have very dark belief systems, and he was basically being trained to be a psychopath in the international banking system. And
okay, the Dutch guy, basically.
The Dutch guy, that's right. And he was able to break his conditioning after being invited to some very sinister parties in which he was invited to do some very, very nefarious, evil things. So that woke him up. And I think more and more people are starting to come to that conclusion too, that some of these people at the very top of the pyramid that seek to control humanity through the monetary system they have extremely dark belief systems.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. I think this, I mean, if you believe that you are so smart that you can force people, to do things because you believe that this makes them happy, or that's what they have to do, that's what they have to think, that's what they have to eat. I think that's, yeah, you need to be a kind of sociopath, that you believe that you are so wise and so you know a kind of a deputy of God on earth. So
Yeah.
at the financial system, I mean, we are living in a system which is, 250 years ago we had basically the Industrial Revolution. Since then, we are still in a system which is heavily shaped, of course, during the last 200 years, 250, 300 years. And even when you talk about the Rothschilds, I mean, also the Rothschilds, for example, they always they had to work, for the feudal system, for the kings and the royals. They were not that free, and they have been pushed into that kind of role. I mean, when we talk about, the money lenders, it was not allowed for the Christians and for a Muslim to lend out money. So basically, only the Jews were allowed to do that, and so of course, it has an impact. And but I studied, the last 7 months, I studied especially Jewish history, and because I was, what I was really scared to see is that people start to think only in collectivistic terms again. You only see, all the Muslims are bad, all the Jews are bad, all the, this nation is bad, that nation is bad, but you don't see the individual any longer. You only see certain groups, and you identify with certain groups. And I thought that's why it was so important to study more about, especially the history of the Jews. I think we can really, I mean, we can do once a whole interview about my findings. But what I want to say is, I mean, Milton Friedman said once, why are the Jews also very strongly involved in the financial system? And he said basically because, of course, I mean, that was the least controlled business, when far away from government, for the control of the kings and so on. So you always find, also in history, you'll find certain patterns, and why certain groups have been put into certain positions, and then the outcome is of course it's still visible. But what I want to mention is really, there are a lot of, every coin has two sides. So you find a lot of fantastic, enlightened Jews, which really can, which really had a great impact on the world. And of course, on the other side, you also find, other people which have, chosen, the other side of the force, of course. But you always have some historical explanations. And I think when we know the history, then we will also understand a bit better what's going on today.
Oh, I completely agree with you. And, I've made the point many times that it was the Rothschilds and the Balfour Declaration that led to the creation of the new state of Israel, and really this Zionist state. And there's many Jews in Israel that stand quite vocally against the Zionist state and these Zionist wars. So I've talked about it many times on this channel, but I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's certainly, I think that the Rothschilds, I personally believe the Rothschilds have hijacked the Jewish religion and that narrative of the Bible to help steer humanity in a certain way, which I don't think is good for anybody on this planet. So let me ask you, with gold at 1327 as we talk today and silver above 18, what are your feelings right now on people listening taking some of their fiat dollars and investing in physical gold and physical silver, and potentially some cryptos? Do you follow the cryptos at all? Because I'd have to believe that the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin, these others, have stolen some of the thunder that we'd otherwise see going into gold and silver. Because,
Yeah,
man, that's turned into a what, 160, $170 billion market cap in these cryptos? That's a lot of fiat that could have gone into gold and silver.
no, absolutely. I think the people who are open for cryptocurrencies are also people who were open in the past for gold, and because of the spike in the cryptos, I believe, yeah, that some money was then missing on the physical gold side, for example. Um, but this is, I mean, when we look into the gold market, January to July this year, it was really quiet in the physical market, in the retail market, all over the world, basically. And then since August, September, it has really turned around. But in the same time, we have seen rising prices. I really believe, it has been, of course, the decrease of the US dollar at the same time, which had an impact, a positive impact on the gold price. But we have also seen more ETFs, the banking system going into paper gold, driving up the prices there. But when it comes to the physical, then at the beginning of the year, the first 6 months, it was really quiet because people were looking for a clear signal. And so right now, I believe, it's just, I mean, that I don't look at gold as a trading vehicle. I look at gold, as my monetary insurance against all the uncertainty in our system. And I still believe, right now when the dollar it might go up again, we might see a correction in the gold price. But the downside potential is maybe $100, $150. But I think the upside potential is huge. And over the midterm, I mean, it's just a matter of time when the next clear bull market is going to start. And I think this is really, this is going to happen over the next few months. So overall, I'm extremely, positive for gold. And I can only say, is the gold price right now, is it expensive or is it cheap? And I truly believe, it's cheap when you see all the additional credit who came into the system, and when we look at the gold price reflected at the moment.
I know you've been traveling a lot and speaking a lot at conferences and spreading the good word about sound money. And, I also know that you're very well aware of the overreach of U.S. hegemony and the U.S. military. I'm looking at your Twitter feed here, and you retweeted this the other day from Jeff Deist. If there's one book you should read in 2017, this is it. The title of it is Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan. Boy, I couldn't agree more with that. I got to tell you, Claudio, I'm not sure if you're aware, but the heroin epidemic now sweeping this nation, the United States, is absolutely out of control. I think the CIA is bringing in the stuff. Of course, you know that under the U.S. military, more opium is being grown now in Afghanistan than ever before. And
Yeah.
it feels a little bit like what the British did to the Chinese, with the opium wars. I feel like they're
Yeah.
flooding the streets of this nation with the opium to screw up families, and then for those that aren't getting into the heroin from Afghanistan, they're getting into the opioids from the pharmaceutical companies. It's just awful. It's destroying families. It's a divide and conquer strategy, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the family is anyway heavily under pressure, since a long time already. That's why we can see that we have, more than 50% divorce rate. And it's an old dogma of also this cultural Marxist, the Frankfurt School, which basically said, that the center of a fascistic system is in the family. That's why they have to also destroy the family. And I mean, no, all these wars, it's just horrible. I mean, all this, I mean, Al Qaeda and ISIS, they haven't been around 50, 60 years ago. And so, the Western world basically really bumped the whole region back to the Stone Ages. We're also accelerating even under Brzezinski, back in '79 when he started to finance and arm the Taliban against the Russians in Afghanistan, before even the Russians invaded. That has an old, also there, an old divide and conquer strategy. And since then we have seen, the whole Middle East destabilizing even more. And the refugee streams is definitely one of the outcomes. But there are also other plans. I mean, you can look up certain UN reports back in 2001 where they were saying, we have to make sure that we can have more mass migration coming into the Western world. That they really want to create the melting pot. I mean, those documents, even official documents, are there. sometimes, I truly believe, they really want to destroy Western civilization. They want to destroy the capitalist system. They want to destroy the family. They want to destroy all the belief system. This is something which has been identified, with especially the cultural Marxist, when they realized that the old Marxist doctrine is not working, that that the entrepreneurs against the employees, so they changed it to the oppressor versus the oppressed ones. And so, of course, that's why we ended up with LGBT and Black Lives Matter and the feminine movement and all that stuff. It's really only to split up the people, to divide and conquer, and make sure that they fight with each other, and and with political correctness, of course, they are doing the mind control, so that people are not. That they're not even open for a debate or for a dialogue, so that they really refuse to talk about certain topics. And this is basically how you can shape a society into certain directions. But it's heavily destructive, and I think the outcome is what we can see right now.
Yep, I agree. And you mentioned the United Nations, so I'll just leave people with this. From Economic Collapse blog, our friend Michael Snyder wrote back on November 1st, 2015, the UN plans to implement universal biometric identification for all of humanity by 2030. Now, if that date rings alarm bells for you guys, you'll want to recall, of course, UN Agenda 2030 policies, which are sure to turn us all into serfs if they're going to limit our ability to use fossil fuels and affordable energy solutions, the ones that we currently employ. Without those, and without new ones being introduced, new clean forms of energy, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. But it's all by design, Claudio. They want to herd us into big giant cities, think Mexico City on steroids, and they want to chip us all. And that's just the fact of the matter. That's what we're dealing with. So I guess it's up to us to inform our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues, our families to say, hey, this is what's going on. And if we're going to allow them to divide and conquer us, then we will be conquered.
Yeah, right. Or at the same time, I mean, I believe what really is key in the future is, we need more decentralization. And at the same time, I truly believe, man is not stupid. That's why we see all these uprisings on a global scale. That's why we see, the fake news. That's why we see the secession movements. That's why we see, the Brexit. And that's why we also have seen that Trump became president. Because there are people they just have enough of the actual or the old policy, and now they are standing up. But of course, what is important then in the future is basically that they understand, those problems. You cannot have one centralized government controlling the whole system. You really have to split it up. You really have to divide power, split it up in different regions, different states. And then I think that's a much better possibility to solve it in the future. Because if you have only one guy, then basically, they will be able to play this divide and conquer strategy, and the outcome will be that both groups, that two sides are just going to fight against each other. But if you would decentralize and decentralize the political power, I think then you would have different possibilities, different ideas would play out, and that would lead to to a divide without using force against each other. So I think that would be the much better direction.
Yeah.
And that's what we were seeing with the secession movement. So I'm still, I'm positive. I don't see that we will be chipped and that we're going to end up in a one world order and all that stuff. I believe man is too intelligent still at the end of the day. Sometimes it takes just quite some while until they're waking up. But with the internet as the Gutenberg press, and as long as we can have different opinions, different ideas, and an open dialogue, under that we can talk to each other freely, and get away with this political correctness, which is really only mind control and which is leading to stupidity. I think that's what we have to overcome. But at the same time, you cannot control the internet, so the governments are losing the information, monopoly, and therefore, as when people can speak to each other and more are doing that, I think then that leads to a higher stage of enlightenment, and so I still believe that this is going to play out in the future, and that's why never give up. Prepare for this. I think we are in a transition period. The most important point right now is making sure that you have an insurance somewhere, that you are diversified, and that you take care of your family, and own some physical gold, where in the area where you live, and of course also if you have enough funds, that you own physical gold in different jurisdictions, which is definitely respecting private property rights, because the government has no possibility to confiscate them. And I think the only jurisdiction so far left on this planet is Switzerland, because of the decentralized political structure, the last direct democracy. The power of our politicians is limited, and therefore confiscation is impossible, because at the end of the day, still the Swiss people have the last vote.
Okay, well then explain to us how people might be able to work with you. If people listening here in the States, and of course there's an international audience listening to this, but I think about 70% of my audience is in the States. For those living in the States, how could they work with you to help diversify at least some of their portfolio into physical gold and or silver for safe storage in Switzerland?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes sense from a certain minimum requirement, and at the same time, for Americans, it's not that easy to buy gold abroad. So there are a few companies which are still doing that, and it's fully compliant, it's fully legal. Everyone can do that. But I think the minimum investment basically should be around 50,000 or 100,000, so that you really can store it in Switzerland, outside the banking system, in a safe private AAA high security location. I'm planning a trip to the States. I will be in October. I will be in Texas and Auburn and Washington and New York. And basically, I will announce my travel schedule on my homepage. And if people are interested, they have a higher net worth, which they would like to diversify and put it into a safe haven, then they can shoot me an email, and I'm happy to answer them and also to advise them what kind of possibilities they have.
Okay, excellent. Well, if you guys happen to be in any of those areas in which Claudio will be visiting, you can go and certainly listen to him in person and shake his hand. He's a good guy. You can learn more at his website, claudiograss.ch, and I suppose that's where they would find the email. Your email address too, Claudio?
Absolutely, it's all on there. So they just can shoot me a message, and then I'm going to reply to all of them. And when it comes to gold, I think the most important is to know that right now 0.3% of total financial assets are on a global scale are in gold, meaning in coins, bars, ETFs, and mining shares. And back in 1981, we stood at 8%, so which was 26 times higher. And the average over the past 3 decades, we stood at 1.5, so that's 1.5 times, 5 times higher. Sorry. So I'm really positive, that it's a good time to buy gold, and it's really important to do it. I think to plan ahead, because we see the cashless society, we see more regulations popping up. So I think people should prepare. Have a safe nest abroad the jurisdiction they are living in, and at the same time, only do it with money you don't need in the next 5 years, because we don't know exactly in the short period of time how it's playing out. People should not invest in physical gold if they have to sell in 3 or 6 or 9 months' time. You really should only do it with that money that you don't need in the next 5 to 10 years. But gold is a store of safe. You can save in gold. Even when you think back, in 1972, for example, $100,000 purchased 1,700 ounces of gold. Today that would be 2.1 million, and today with $100,000 you can buy 82 ounces of gold. So it's a real store of value. And once a guy said, the golden age will come to man when they have forgotten gold, and with I think 0.3, it shows that we are almost there. And with all the uncertainties that we are witnessing, over the last few years already, but it's not heading in the right direction, it's heading in the wrong direction. I think it definitely makes sense to protect you and the ones you love, with physical gold, and to have a real insurance which is not part of the banking system, because within the banking system, property rights are only of temporary nature.
Yeah, and I agree. The way I look at gold and silver, the physical gold and silver that I own, I don't even look at the prices anymore. I honestly don't. It was just a month ago, or whenever gold went over 1,300 recently, I didn't even notice until weeks later I was having an interview and that was brought up. I don't even look anymore, because for me personally, physical gold and physical silver that I own is the bedrock to our wealth preservation. It's the bedrock to my quote-unquote portfolio, so I don't even look at it. It's like not looking at the foundation of your home. You might realize when you have to paint your house or put a new roof on, but you really don't ever look at the foundation. That should be your gold and silver in physical form. If you guys want to learn more about how to work with Claudio, visit his website at claudiograss.ch, and you can work with a good guy in Switzerland who can definitely help you. Claudio, it was great talking with you again. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Sean, as well. Pleasure talking to you. And let's do it again soon in the future.
I would like that. Maybe we could get you back on in a few months, and you guys can also check out Claudio's website to figure out those dates in October in which when he'll be in the United States. Maybe you can catch up with him and say hi personally. All right, Claudio, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye,
Thank you. And guys, thank you so much for your support at sgtreport.com. The new and improved site is now mobile friendly. Check it out on your mobile device. A special thanks to my patrons over at patreon.com/sgtreport. You're really making a difference for us. Thanks so much for listening, guys. God bless.
This country has a vicious, corrupt core, okay? And the most vicious, corrupt people are sitting in D.C. right now, running the show and forming the media elite and establishment that surrounds and protects them and promulgates their bullshit all over the airways.